My husband lifted his glass to toast my disgrace. His mother wore the smile of someone who had been waiting years for this exact moment. Moments later, the restaurant doors swung open and every federal agent in the room turned to look at me. My name is Briar Wickham, and until that night, I had mastered the skill of seeming invisible. I was 34, married to a man named Grant, sitting beside his family at a private anniversary dinner that I had quietly paid for myself. The chandeliers made everything glow with expense, even the lies being told beneath them. Grant kept his hand resting on the back of my chair, not on my shoulder, as though I were a piece of furniture he had purchased. His mother, Elaine, tapped her spoon against her wine glass for attention. Before dessert, she announced, we have a small announcement to make. Standing in the spot that had once been mine, she placed her hand on his arm with the ease of something rehearsed. No one at the table reacted with shock. No one questioned why my medical history was being displayed. Elaine simply folded her hands and said, her name is Vanessa. She understands what marriage truly means. Grant refused to look at me. I stared down at the papers scattered across the white tablecloth. 3 miscarriages, 2 surgeries, every painful detail I had begged him to keep private. I remembered sobbing into his chest after our last hospital visit, while he swore those losses belonged only to us, never to anyone else. He had lied so effortlessly. Vanessa leaned forward and said, I didn't know she'd be here. Grant cut her off. She needs to hear this. Those words hurt more than the betrayal itself. I rose to my feet, afraid my legs might give out if I stayed seated any longer. My purse slipped off my shoulder and dropped to the floor, and a sealed envelope slid partway out. Elaine spotted it first. What is that? She asked. I picked it up and almost laughed out loud. Grant believed those medical papers could destroy me. He had completely forgotten about the document he'd signed 6 months earlier. The moment he recognized that envelope, his expression shifted entirely. He knew exactly what it contained. 6 months earlier, he had come to my office carrying flowers and apologies after one of our arguments about finances. He insisted our marriage needed more transparency, claiming that couples with shared assets often ended up fighting over them during divorce. I believed him. My late father had left me a small commercial building, and the rental income from it quietly covered most of our expenses. Grant convinced me to sign a management agreement giving him control over the property while I recovered from surgery. He called it protection. My lawyer called it a dangerous mistake, but I hired her anyway. She added one clause that Grant barely skimmed, too busy celebrating his apparent win. The clause stated that any attempt to transfer ownership without my written consent would trigger an automatic fraud investigation and freeze every linked account. Holding that envelope, I remembered her parting words. Keep this close. One day someone will reveal exactly who they are. Elaine reached across the table. Hand it over. I pulled it back. Grant finally met my eyes, his voice softening. Briar, don't make a scene. That's when I understood. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was terrified I had already discovered what he'd been doing behind my back. Looking at him, I saw a stranger wearing my husband's face. For years, I had blamed myself for every fracture in our marriage. I told myself grief had hardened us both after losing our babies. But standing there in that restaurant, I finally realized my kindness hadn't healed anything. It had simply made me easier to exploit. I opened the envelope. Inside wasn't just one paper, but a full copy of the agreement, along with letters my attorney had prepared in case anything ever happened to me or my property. Grant grabbed for my wrist. Put that away, he said, his voice trembling. Elaine noticed the shake in his voice too, and her smile finally vanished. I stepped back and asked one simple question. How much did you promise Vanessa? The color drained from Elaine's face. Vanessa turned to Grant, confused. What is she talking about? Grant said nothing. I turned the documents toward the table for everyone to see. 3 transfer requests, 2 forged signatures, and 1 application to sell my father's building. Every date matched the nights he'd claimed to be working late. Vanessa picked up one of the pages, her hands shaking. You told me this building belonged to your family. Grant opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then my phone rang. It was my attorney, and I answered on speaker. Her first sentence silenced the entire table. Briar, the bank just confirmed someone attempted to drain our accounts tonight. The whole restaurant fell into stunned silence. I could hear ice cubes settling in untouched glasses and the quiet hum of the air conditioning overhead. My attorney's voice stayed calm. They didn't succeed, she said. The fraud protection activated exactly as planned. Grant's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. What fraud protection? My attorney answered before I could. The one tied to every account connected to Briar Wickham's property. Vanessa lowered the papers, staring at him in disbelief. You told me she didn't know anything. Grant ignored her completely, looking at me the way a drowning person looks toward shore. Briar, please, this isn't what it seems. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I asked my attorney to continue. She explained that the failed transfer attempt had automatically alerted the bank, our insurance provider, and state investigators, since forged signatures were involved, and copies of every document had already been secured. Elaine stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. You planned this! I shook my head. No, I planned to trust my husband. Vanessa took a step away from Grant, opened her purse, and pulled out a small velvet box, setting it on the table. Inside was an engagement ring. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. He proposed to me this afternoon. Then she looked at me, tears in her eyes. He told me he was already a widower. The ring sat between us like evidence at a crime scene, untouched. Vanessa's gaze shifted from me to Grant, searching desperately for one honest face in a room full of deception. He reached toward her, but she stepped back. You told me she died during your marriage, she said quietly. Grant swallowed hard. I can explain. She let out a broken laugh. My father was buried with less deception surrounding him than you carry. Elaine grabbed Vanessa's arm. Don't humiliate this family. Vanessa pulled free. I was never part of your family. For the first time that night, I watched another woman realize she had been used, not chosen, and my anger toward her began to fade. Grant had told each of us a different story because he believed women were easier to control than the truth. My attorney's voice came through the phone again. Briar, investigators are asking if you want to file a formal complaint. Grant looked at me, eyes glistening with tears that once would have moved me. If you do this, you'll destroy my life. Those words hung heavy in the air. Not, I'm sorry, not, I was wrong. Only fear for himself. I glanced at the engagement ring and understood the final betrayal. He had been planning another wedding before even ending ours. I expected to feel triumphant, but all I felt was exhaustion. The woman across from me had been promised the future I once had, and the man standing between us had assumed we'd fight over him like a prize, instead of recognizing him as a warning. I picked up the ring and gently closed Vanessa's fingers around it. Keep it, I told her. You'll need proof of who he really is. Grant stared at me. Briar, please. That word used to break me. Now it meant nothing. I told my attorney to file the complaint. She replied calmly. It's already done. Grant blinked. What? The bank required immediate action, she said. Investigators are already on their way. Elaine called me heartless, insisting families forgive mistakes. I looked at the woman who had just exposed my medical history to a room full of strangers and said, You stopped being my family before dinner even started. Grant reached for my hand. I stepped away. The restaurant doors opened again, and two investigators walked in holding folders. One asked for Grant by name, the other looked straight at me. Mrs. Whitcomb, we found another set of forged documents. I frowned. There shouldn't have been another set. The investigator opened the folder, and the signature at the bottom belonged to my late father. I knew instantly it was fake. My father always signed with a fountain pen that left a tiny break in the first letter of his last name. This signature was too smooth. Grant had never noticed that detail. I had. The investigator asked if I wanted to make a statement. I looked at Grant. His shoulders had collapsed completely. Elaine stood beside him, but even she wouldn't take his hand. Vanessa quietly slid the engagement ring across the table toward the investigators. For the record, she said, he gave me this while his wife was sitting at home. I gave my statement. I told the truth, without exaggeration, without protecting anyone. Grant broke down when he was told the forged documents, the attempted transfers, and the false filings would all become part of one investigation. He begged for my help. I thought back to the hospital room where he'd once promised we'd face every loss together, then to him introducing another woman while my deepest pain sat exposed on a dinner table. I walked out without a single word. The night air felt lighter than my marriage ever had.